Everyone ready? All right. Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. My name is Diana Williams. I'm the sergeant with the Mesa Police Department Media Relations Office. At this time, I'm going to introduce the speakers of today's press conference. First, it will be Mesa Police Chief Ramon Batista. He will be speaking about the incident that occurred on May 17th and about the Mesa Police Department's renewed vision. Upon his completion of the statement, he will not be taking any questions. Following the chief will be former Maricopa County Attorney Rick Romley. Mr. Romley, at the completion of his statement, will be taking questions. At this time, I will turn it over to our Mesa Police Chief, Ramon Batista.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. This week, the Mesa Police Department has been in the news for all the wrong reasons. Over the last few days, we've seen several videos showing situations involving our officers. They are disturbing, and they will not be tolerated. All of these incidents are under investigation, and because of pending litigation in some of these matters, I will not be able to discuss them in specific detail. However, as the chief of this department, I want to speak openly and directly with you and let this community and the nation know what I'm doing about it. First, let me address the video that we released yesterday showing a 15-year-old and our officers. On May 17th, officers were investigating an armed robbery and located a suspect who was arrested and subsequently charged with multiple counts, including armed robbery and aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. In the body camera footage released yesterday, you see the interaction after the young man was placed in handcuffs. The level of force used by our officers was brought to my attention. And as a result, an internal investigation was initiated by the department. Please know that the actions shown on that video and all these recent videos do not reflect the vast majority of the men and women of the Mesa Police Department. Our officers work every day to keep our community safe. Our officers deal with difficult and life-threatening situations, and they put their lives on the line to protect our city. I'm proud to be their chief, and I owe them my utmost effort to make this department the very best that it can be. And that's exactly what I'm doing today. Let me be crystal clear. I'm angry and I'm deeply disappointed by what I saw in those videos. It's unacceptable, and it needs to stop immediately. It's essential that when this community interacts with our officers, they are treated with the utmost professionalism, no matter the situation. Quite honestly, that's not what I saw in those videos, and that will change. Starting today, I've asked the National Police Executive Research Forum, based in Washington, D.C., to conduct a comprehensive and fully independent investigation looking into our use of force events over the past 3 years, as well as our policies, procedure, and training. It's imperative that a completely autonomous organization from outside of our city conducts such a thorough examination. Simply put, these investigators will shine a glaring light on the areas where we have fallen short, and they will help us fix it. Let me read directly from the Police Executive Research Forum's website, and I hope it will give you a better understanding of why they are the best suited to help us create substantive change in this department. This organization, and I quote, reforms police agencies' policies, training, and equipment regarding police use of force, based on the idea that the sanctity of human life is at the heart of the mission of policing. PERF has conducted research into re-engineering police training on use of force. They released a set of guiding principles on use of force and published a training guide to help police agencies put the guiding principles into effect. In addition, and this is important, they develop strategies for rebuilding police community trust. Folks, that's the whole point. Along with pinpointing our challenges and helping us fix them, it's essential that we continue building and rebuilding trust, dignity, and respect within our community. But that's not enough. I've taken the additional step of asking former Maricopa County Attorney Rick Romley, who is here with us today, to conduct a separate but equally thorough independent investigation. For those watching this outside of Arizona, you should know that Mr. Romley is a greatly respected community leader and a relentless investigator. I appreciate his willingness to conduct this investigation, and I am grateful that a person of his caliber would take on this matter. Ladies and gentlemen, and most of the people that have met me here now know this, I've wanted to be a police officer since I was a kid growing up in Tucson. Even back then, I knew that serving my community and keeping people safe was my calling. I've loved being a cop ever since the day I started back in 1986. And it is still my great, great honor to do this job to help make our city safe. I'm eternally grateful for these independent investigations, but you should know that my team and I will work every single day to make sure these situations don't happen again. And so I'll say, for those that are reluctant to change, and I'll say, for those that don't believe that we can change, I'll tell you that I will be relentless in my pursuit of organizational excellence. Preserving and protecting your safety, your trust, and your faith is my highest priority. From the bottom of my heart, I promise you, we will fix this. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to introduce former Maricopa County Attorney, Mr. Rick Romley.
Thank you, Chief. Well, good afternoon. My name is Rick Romley. Many of you I have come to know when I was the Maricopa County Attorney over the years. Many seasoned individuals that are here, but for those of you that I don't know, I look forward, I'm sure that we'll have conversations in the very near future. Let me, first of all, echo, well, these are extraordinarily difficult times with the Mesa Police Department, but not just with the Mesa Police Department, but with law enforcement throughout this nation. These are challenging times, and I have to commend the chief for understanding that the Mesa Police Department, by and large, has the vast majority are professional, dedicated public servants that care deeply about this community. However, if issues do arise, it is the obligation upon all, whether it is the police chief, whether it is the mayor and city council, whether it is the unions that represent the officers, to make sure that the police officers conduct themselves in the most professional manner possible. And secondly, I think you all would agree with me that it's quite unusual for a police chief to take extraordinary actions of having, number one, the criminal investigation is not being conducted by the Mesa Police Department, but has been given over to the Scottsdale Police Department, which will be reviewed by the county attorney at that time. So there is an independent body. He's brought in outside national police organization that reviews policies and procedures and reviews the history of a department, to review that and make recommendations to the chief. And of course, there will be an internal affairs investigation that will be reviewing the conduct of the officers as how it comports with departmental policies at that point. But what's really unusual, and I've been at this a long time in my career, is that you rarely see a chief bring in somebody outside as well that reports directly to the chief. And that is my responsibility. I will be reporting directly to the chief. In working, and as this internal affairs investigation proceeds, I will be working and I'm not sure it's fair to say conducting my own investigation, but be working to make sure that there is thoroughness, there's objectivity into this review. The chief is absolutely correct in that the public confidence must not be diminished in any way. So I'm proud to be working with the Mesa Police Department once again. You know, as the former Maricopa County attorney, I know this department quite well, and I know there's a lot of dedicated individuals, but it must maintain the public's confidence with that. I'll take questions, and I just want to let you know that, of course, I'm not going to draw any conclusions at this time. I mean, the investigation is just beginning, and we cannot be talking about facts, and I think that most of you understand that quite well. But I give you my word, and for those of you that know me, I've been known, you know, to take on difficult cases, and I call it as I see it, and that's what I promise you here. So, any questions at all, I'll be glad to. Yes, ma'am.
Just for clarification on the National Police Organization that's going to be also conducting their independent
Yes.
investigation, are they just going to be looking at the policies with the Mesa Police Department, or are they also going to be looking at and investigating the use of force case?
In this particular, they're going to be, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, they're going to be looking at the historical use of force practices of the Mesa Police Department. It'll go back a number of years, as well as policies. They will not be investigating this particular incident. Incidents, excuse me.
Do you know why the chief isn't taking questions?
I think that I think it's more of an introduction of me, quite frankly, to be honest. And I've urged the chief. This is very, very difficult. He wants to, he wants to make sure that he lets the rank and file know that he believes in the professionalism of this department. But on the other hand, what he saw was disturbing. He's not drawing conclusions because that's what the investigation is for. And that's why they're on administrative leave. And I think that he wants to be careful not to be drawn into fact questions, because I have counseled the chief, You cannot go there yet. We have to conduct the investigation and make sure that we have all the facts. I mean, quite frankly, I will be making a recommendation to the department. I'll just tell you straight out that we want the public's help. If there's anybody from the public that has information related to these two matters, I want to see it, and I would urge them to be doing that. But right now, I've urged the chief not to be commenting upon the facts.
You're operating as his legal counsel, but you're also...
No, I'm operating as sort of an independent investigator, as I've done. Well, I'm not going to do the lawyering thing. That's for the current county attorney on the legal criminal charges and Scottsdale Police Department. This is more of overseeing, making sure that the investigation, well, let me just say it this way. You know, the trust and confidence by the public is paramount in this particular matter. And as confident, I'm sure the chief is, of the Internal Affairs Department, he wants to, there will be some that will say that, well, that's just police investigating police. And I think that's why he wanted to bring me on board, because I'm independent and I will report directly to the police chief. And if I feel that there's not a thoroughness in the investigation or there's a lack of objectivity, I will bring that to the chief's attention directly. I do not have to go through anybody, but directly there to make sure that this is thorough, objective, so that he gets a number of viewpoints on what occurred in these two incidents.
Ultimately, who decides the outcome for these officers who were involved in
As I don't know all the policy in MESA, but I believe the chief makes a recommendation to the city manager, and the city manager makes the final call. I think that's it. I could be wrong.
So Scottsdale will only handle deciding whether or not criminal charges will be...
Oh, the criminal charges. The criminal charges are not part of what we're talking about today. The criminal charges have been, the entire criminal investigation has been given to Scottsdale Police Department. They will conduct the criminal investigation. These are two separate investigations that are going to be conducted. Well, there's actually three things going to be going on. You have the criminal. Scottsdale will conduct that, and it will be referred to the Maricopa County Attorney, Bill Montgomery, who's the current county attorney, that will determine whether or not charges should be brought. You then have the review of the history of the use of force by Mesa PD and policies within the Mesa Police Department. That will be reviewed out of the National Organization for Police Departments. And then there's the internal affairs investigation that will determine whether discipline is warranted in any of these certain situations of the officers that were involved. And that's part of what I am a part of. I'm not going to do the criminal.
How do you think Mesa Police got to this point? You have two, very serious cases that were revealed in the matter of a few days of each other. How did the department get to this point?
That's what we have to find out. I mean,
do you think it's years of a culture of
I really don't know if these are, it's been reported in the news. I mean, I read in the paper today just the three incidents, the two that are subject of today, and then the prior one with the elderly woman, and there's four, and the shooting. I think that that's what we have to find out, and I think that that's why this chief is going to extraordinary lengths here. Independent criminal investigation, national organization reviewing the history of the use of force and the policies that exist within the Mesa Police Department. And then he wants to have also this independent investigation on administrative, if there should be any type of disciplinary actions against any of the officers of it. But to say what would have caused it, it's just too early to say. It's something that the investigation, I hope, begins to ferret through. I'm not going to get into the facts, but I've viewed the videos and I've seen some things, and I have a lot of questions. I mean, I have a lot of questions, and for those of you that know me, I'm not going to be shy in asking them. So, and it will be, I will report directly to the chief on my concerns.
Will you be paid for your work?
I'm sorry?
Will you be paid for your...
Yes, I will.
And how much do you plan on overseeing the internal affairs?
Well, I don't like the term of overseeing because I think that that's not totally accurate. They're going to be conducting their investigation as they see fit, but I will be honest, I will be giving input to the executive chief who oversees that department, as well as, and I hope to be a participant in that as well, because I have recommendations here. I think that the first thing that the chief has done very well, when you have public confidence being lost, openness and transparency are critical, as well as the strategy by which you're trying to go forward. Laying that out to the public is the only way you're going to restore confidence. It will not be easy. This is going to be hard inside the Mesa Police Department. It's going to be hard for these officers, but you must deal with it. If not, you're going to have another situation someday down the road. You will be. But for example, I will be there. I gave you one example. I'd like to set up a hotline to where we've got to make sure that we are thorough in our investigation. First thing I'll recommend is that we canvass that apartment complex, see if anybody saw anything that maybe weren't in the department reports. I'm going to ask the public to come forward with any information that they may have in regards to that. I think that we have to make sure that we have a thorough investigation first. And then there's many things that go, that's only step one. And then there's strategies about how you go through it, who you interview, when you interview, those types of things. And I've done this my entire career, and I think most know I've taken on the cases. So,
Sir,
yes.
Sir,
Yes.
Chief,
Can you identify, because I'm going to have to get to know you. You're with?
I'm Miguel Garcia with the Arizona Republic.
Oh, good seeing you.
Has the chief briefed you on the DOJ investigation into the Brelsford?
No, he has not. I just met with the chief yesterday and the city manager and several other departmental heads yesterday. They asked me to come in, and I agreed to do this.
So you want to know if that investigation has sort of pressured the chief to look into these cases?
I did not get that impression at all during my briefing at all. Look, I'm quasi-retired. I'm doing more veteran stuff. I think most know that I'm tied into the veteran community quite a bit. I have some major contracts with some major corporations. I wasn't really looking on taking it on another headache, and this is going to be a headache, everybody. But when I met the chief, and it was my first time meeting this chief, I know he's sincere. I know he really wants to do what's right for this department and this community. And if I thought that it was something else, I don't need the gig guy. I just don't.
Not to take the pressure off Mesa, but do you think other police agencies in town might have some of this culture too?
Well, it's very since I've left as the Maricopa County Attorney, things have changed a little bit. And I've talked with Bill Montgomery over this. I've talked to him about, it's a very different day. I mean, everybody has cameras, so it's not just the body cameras. Quite frankly, when you look at the one at the apartment complex, the one where the allegations of abuse occurred with the striking of the individual, the apartment complex video was better than the body cameras. I mean, I didn't think the body cameras were that good. So I think that, the use of social media, the quick access to cameras on certain incidents, and I just think that, there's a discussion about law enforcement and, I think there's a challenge to the credibility of law enforcement today, which I think is unfortunate. I've been to too many funerals of law enforcement officers that have died. I care deeply about the profession, but I do believe very strongly that they must be professional and conduct themselves appropriately. And I've charged police officers when I was county attorney, and this chief wants to correct if there's a problem here, any problem that exists within the Mesa Police Department. I'll come back to you. I haven't gotten her yet. She's been raising her hand.
Anita So from the Associated Press.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're going to be looking at both of these two recent incidents plus past incidents in this history?
I won't be looking at the past incidents. It'll only be these 2 current incidents because that's tied to the internal affairs and the investigation ongoing. The National Police Organization, PERF, will be reviewing the history of the use of force in the Mesa Police Department, as well as the current policy. Now, the chief may ask me to discuss policy. He may bring me into that discussion, as to whether there should be policy changes in any way, because, a lot of it is legal ramifications. We all are aware of, the disclosure of certain things. I'm a person that believes transparency has to be there, but you've got to be careful not to compromise a criminal case. But you should err on the side of transparency, because that's the only way you're going to keep confidence with the public.
To that end, will the chief be taking any questions from us at any point?
I'm sure that he will at some time. I mean, he's going to do some public forums as well. I know he wants to get out, and I've urged him. He needs to let everybody know that he is clearly going to do a thorough investigation. I will still urge him not to be commenting upon facts that he knows until we come more to the conclusion of this thing, because it just wouldn't be appropriate. I mean,
I had a bunch of policy questions for him. Is it possible to ask him those now?
He's not here right now, but I think that will come up. I'm not even sure he's reviewed all of the policy issues, and I'm sure he wants to talk with others as well on those policy issues. We're just starting this process. I'm sure he'll make himself available. This chief,
Do you know when?
No, I don't know when. Yes.
What is the comment to Mesa Police, their union, who came out earlier this week criticizing the chief for coming out and speaking about the initial incident that was the video that came out earlier this week? What is the response to that? Critics of the chief and how he's maneuvering this? Well,
I understand that the union has a role of supporting their officers, but I also know that the union, they themselves want to make sure that their department stays professional. And I can't believe that the union, if there's after the investigation, if there's improper conduct, that they won't hopefully be supporting this chief, because I know that they want the best for this department as well. So I'm urging the union to give us some time, to let us be thorough in our investigation. I give you my word, it will be objective in the investigation. But when I was county attorney, I had a couple of bad apples of attorneys, in my office. Once in a while, you get somebody that is just very unfortunate. And I hope that they will stand in solidarity with this department, that they want the best for their department, and if there's something wrong with an officer, whatever, that they'll be supportive once they see the facts. I hope that. So, yes, ma'am.
Based on your experience in investigating, maybe you can't answer this, but how well do you know if it's typically within protocol for officers to apply pressure or inflict pain on subjects who are already in handcuffs?
I'm quite familiar with that. I was a former Maricopa County attorney, and I would bring charges against police officers if it was inappropriate. And of course, once I get into the facts and I begin to understand it better, I will, of course, convey my recommendation or my thoughts to the chief. I will not be making a determination of whether or not criminal charges should be brought. That will be left to the current county attorney. But I know it quite well. I was the county attorney here for almost 20 years.
So is that typically out of...
It depends upon the situation. I mean, you've got to sit there and see the degree of resistance, what's going on, the degree of force that was used, the number of officers that were there, how well the situation was controlled. And that depends upon the investigation itself. So I don't want to prejudge anything. I mean, I've seen officers, unfortunately, that have had to use extraordinary force because the guy was high on what we used to call sherms, PCP and marijuana. They used to have extraordinary strength. I mean, it took a tremendous amount of effort to do things. It depends upon the facts as they exist. We've seen the videos. I agree with the chief that it causes me concern, and I agree that the officer should be placed on administrative leave. And but now we have to do the thorough investigation, and that thorough investigation will require public input, if they are witnesses to the case, talking to the officers. They must talk to a police department. It's called a garrity issue. They, in a criminal case, they don't have to. They have a Fifth Amendment right. But in an internal investigation, they must subject themselves to an interview, and if they don't, then that can subject themselves to even further disciplinary actions. So it will be a thorough investigation. Look, out of all of this, it's going to be thorough. I know how to do it, and I've done them, and I'm sure that report, once it's completed, it will come out. And then I'll be up here probably for several hours at least talking on my findings. So,
do you think there can be any cons to opening up a hotline for anyone?
Yes, I think it is. I mean, I've already mentioned it to the chief today. He hasn't made a decision on that. Look, we must take input from anybody that may have information regarding these two particular matters. And that's not necessarily, in my mind, input that are witnesses to this particular incident. But if you have an officer that they know about that has prior misconduct in this department, I want to know that. I want to know if we've got a history of a police officer using excessive force, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I think public input is good, because we can't go and review every single record at times, because, and so we'll need to know that. Back there, and then I'll come back to you.
My name is Nicole Hernandez. I'm with Contact News. What will you do with that information about the history of the department?
That will be up to the chief. I think that will help guide not just policy changes, but training changes. There's nothing more important than training, making it clear that the officers throughout the entire agency understand what the policy is, how to respond to given situations. Because, look, I think most of you mostly know I'm a veteran. I'm a combat veteran. I understand how difficult these types of situations can be when you're in a potentially life-threatening or difficult situation. It's not always easy, but training is critical on that. And so I think once he learns that history, potential weaknesses in a policy, training deficiencies, I think he'll put together a game plan that will address that for the long-term benefit of the department. Yes.
Do you have a timetable? I haven't heard of it.
Well, I know the chief has kind of thought of it a timetable, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to disagree with the chief. You never know. I've learned a long time ago that as you begin to get into these things, all of a sudden you turn over another rock and something new pops up, and you got to follow that lead. And then another thing comes up. So it could be as short as 2 months, and it could take 3-4 months. I know that the chief is making it a priority, and he says that this one he's going to commit huge resources to try to begin to get to the bottom of some of these things.
2 or 3 months.
Like I said, I can't give you a hard one, but I know that, let me just characterize it this way. The chief has made this a priority, and he wants to get through this as quick as is possible. Yes. How have you been?
Yeah. Okay.
Who are you with now?
I'm with Arizona News Radio.
Okay, same one. Okay.
Good to see you, Rick. Yesterday's conference, a point was made that the cops detected some kind of body language that suggested to them that he was ready to fight. And that's something I know that you dealt with in analyzing some of these things. Is there some criteria that you have that analyzes that body language so you can come to a determination, yes, they had reason to be afraid?
What you have to do is you have to take the given facts as you know it. I mean, it's one thing for one of the officers to sit there and say they were concerned because of the body language of the individual. Then you have to compare it to the video and the facts that they come out through the witnesses and see whether or not that is a reasonable statement by the officer. I mean, I believe in law enforcement so strongly, but if you just sit there and take the word of a police officer, well, I was concerned about threats, even if there wasn't a threat, if you take it at face value, then you will never have any accountability for potential abuses by a department. So you've got to compare what the comments are said there, but it must be analyzed against the given facts, the video, and so forth. And that's the only way you'll be able to determine it. By way of example, I was appointed as the interim county attorney, as many of you remember, back in 2010 after I'd retired. And during that time, there was a police officer in Phoenix. His name was Chrisman. And Chrisman shot and killed somebody, and I brought homicide charges against him. And in the end, well, there was some forensics. I mean, we had the pressure marks of the barrel placed against his temple, but there was an officer in the Phoenix Police Department that came forward and who was present during that time and said it was not, it doesn't matter what Mr. Chrisman said, you know, because we had another officer that was there and saw something totally different. And then I looked at the past, you know, the forensics that were available, and then I looked at the past conduct of this officer where he'd been disciplined before for planning on a mentally ill black woman that was homeless, a crack pipe on her, you know. So you have to take it all into account. There's not one specific piece that can generally be definitive. You got to look at the whole picture and try to draw the best conclusions that you can.
Can you comment on the chief changing the use of force policy?
No, I can't. I don't know much about that. You're going to be the policy wonk in this whole thing. I can see that. Who are you with, by the way?
KJZZ.
KJZZ. Okay.
And if anybody is a Brady cop,
right.
It's on the Brady List.
Brady List.
Yeah. If there is that an automatic black mark?
Well, does everybody know what the Brady List is? Okay. The Brady List is basically there's an obligation placed upon prosecutors by the United States Supreme Court in a very old decision that basically says that the prosecutor has an obligation to disclose to the defense attorney any type of information they may have that would constitute a question on their credibility, those types of things. And when I was county attorney, I created the Brady List, which nobody liked, but it was an obligation upon us. And basically, if we find a police officer has lied in a prior incident or whatever, we put them on the Brady List so that we can disclose it to the defense bar. That will always complicate any prosecution of a case against a defendant because you raise into question the credibility of that officer. So it really does become much more difficult to be successful in it. And so that's why, look at, and I know I'm talking, it sounds all negative against the officers. It's not. By far, the vast majority of officers are extraordinary individuals. They're professional. They want to give back to their community. You know, but that does not mean that, you know, that there cannot be conduct that at times crosses a line. And we, as leaders in our whatever organization we are, we have an obligation to make sure that that does not continue on and become a cultural issue within an organization. If we don't do something.
Based on what you know so far, do you know if any of these officers, the 7 officers that are currently on leave from the past 2 incidents, have had any sort of force complaint?
I won't comment on that. I won't comment at this time.
The 7 officers are all members of the same unit or squad or some smaller subset that there could be a particular problem.
I won't comment on that.
Do you know when you're just not commenting? Or
yes, I know.
So you won't tell us if any of
No, I won't. Look, it just wouldn't be appropriate. Otherwise, you'll be asking for a press conference every day, and I'll be giving you the investigation as it unfolds. It's just not appropriate. And the agency over the union over here, they would be rightfully disturbed if we start ferreting out pieces of information before we have actually concluded and we can draw some conclusions based upon the full. It just wouldn't be right.
If there is a unit or squad that's a particular problem, is that unit or squad sort of shut down right now?
We are just starting up the investigation at this point in time, and I think that we have to be sure of what we have before any decisions by the chief can be made.
So there could be officers that are in these unit or squads that are out on the streets right now.
I can't comment on any of that. That I don't even know. That I don't know. So
what some people were disturbed by was the fact that the chief, some of these things kind of flew under the table, were under like, how do you think this happened? How do you think the chief did not know about? How does it typically work if an officer has to use force on a subject? Is the chief supposed to know about each one of these instances?
I wish that a chief, and I remember as Maricopa County Attorney, I got 70,000 felonies submitted every year, and people expected me to know every case, and I go, you just can't. You believe in those that are in leadership positions of this department. You believe in the rank and file, and I know the chief does. He cares and he believes in them. But when something comes to his attention and it is brought to his attention, then he'll deal with it. And that's, truthfully, that's the only reason, and this will be my last question, that is the reason why I'm on board, because I believe this chief really wants to do what's right for this organization. And MESA is a great organization. I mean, I can't tell you the number of major issues that when I was county attorney, that we dealt with, and extraordinary individuals. Last question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how these incidents come to light. Is the body cam video routinely reviewed, or is it only reviewed if there's a complaint?
That I don't know. Remember, body cams came after I left, so I will, it's a question that we need to know. It's part of that practice of, how do we put into place a system, of being able to make sure that we have oversight, adequate oversight. But remember, I don't even know how many officers are on the police department now. How many sworn do we have? Anybody know?
About 800.
About 800? And the union doesn't know? I'll remember that. So.
51.
Oh, there we go. So you got 751 officers, and you got so many on each, for each detail, and that camera's going all the time. You can't review it. I mean, you'd have to have a staff 3 times bigger to watch the video cameras and so forth. So there's a practicality issue here as well. So
Yeah, I never saw what happened with the elderly woman. What was the?
I wasn't involved in that, so I don't really know. Yeah.
I don't know if there was any investigation or if anybody was...
I don't know about that. I know I'm not being brought on for that particular matter. So, all right. Just the 2 current ones that are outstanding.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you. Thank you, Sergeant. Yes.
We will be handing out 3 documents. The first one's going to be a copy of the special order. Yes, we provided it yesterday, but if you didn't get one, you'll have a hard copy today. The second is going to be a communication contact for PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, and then the third will be Mr. Romney's bio and background if you need that for any reporting purposes. Thank you all for coming. Have a good day.
We'll have those over here on this side of the room.